I'll even tell you which one.
Put everybody back.
Are we back?
We're live.
Okay. It looks like we're back. Welcome back from the break. We're on to item number 6. This is continuing discussion of the South Main Street corridor table of uses. This originally came up in the December council meeting. It was voted to table it until this second meeting in February, which is this one. In the meantime, we had a work session at the first part of 2019. So it looks like Cassie Younger is here to report. I know that some further information was requested from the council as well too. I don't know if you're going to report on that or what, or you're going to give us an overview, but we'll let you run with it, Cassie.
Yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions or clarifications you guys may need. Since it has been a few months, I just thought I would really briefly go through the backup materials just so we're all on the same page. The table that's listed in the transmittal report with the yellow yeah, the end of the transmittal report is the final recommendation that the Planning Commission brought to you. We have a backup of all the definitions that were included, and then the table at the end of the backup materials that just says CUP permitted, not permitted table is the table that Councilman requested a few months ago that lists everything as it currently stands in the commercial medium zone. So, yeah. And then all the gray highlighted things are the ones that are recommended from the Planning Commission. And there was one double list. Media service is a permitted use, so you can cross it off the not permitted use because it's listed twice. So those were just some clarifications of what you're looking at. So I don't know if you have any questions or just need discussion. Media service, right, it's listed under both permitted and not permitted, but it is a permitted use.
Right here.
Yeah, so you can just.
So, looking for information, I have a couple of questions to clarify. I think it was clarified for me, but I want to make sure the whole council realizes. I've always been told, or assumed that I had been told, that a building could only be 10,000 square feet on Main Street. So when we were looking at some of these, it came up that, well, you don't need to worry, it couldn't be a bigger building because it can't be more than 10,000 square feet. Is that correct, or can it go over 10,000 square feet?
Our commercial medium zone lists 10,000 square feet as the maximum square footage of a building. So unless that changes.
It was a trick question, Cassie.
Corey finds gray where he can find gray.
If you're looking at the commercial medium as a base zone, you're capped at 10,000. And then the CH zone's capped at 50, and the CVH, anything over 50 is conditional use or in a planned center. In technical terms, for the CM only, no, it can't be over 10,000. However, in an overlay situation where things are allowed to be modified, there's potential to go over.
So I'm really concerned that we are voting on these where we thought they could be 10,000 square feet, and actually they could be 15,000 square feet. The fire station is over 13,000 square feet right now.
Just under, just for minute technicality.
So my concern is, until we decide what we're gonna, I know it upset the Planning Commission that we were concerned about the overlay, but if I don't want to change this while the overlay is still on and leave a loophole for somebody to come in and hurry and do something. So I have another question while Corey's up here.
Well, Robin, so Robin and I talked about this, shared some things back and forth. Why don't you go into mention the thing about Park City? Since you had the conversation, I didn't. So
Park City zones, they take some of these things and do them. They want to keep their Main Street quaint, small, whatever, and they like to have local people, which we also do too. But so they're picking some of their zoning and putting the size of a building with the zoning. So they've got 5,000 square foot or 7,000 square foot buildings.
Yeah, you can build a relationship. You know, typical zoning just looks at lot sizes.
Right.
And then our zoning extends beyond lot sizes and regulates by district not to exceed maximum sizes. In Park City's cases, so there's two ways that's used. The basic way is an FAR, floor area ratio.
Right.
So depending on your lot size, depends on the floor area ratio that you can build. An example of our ordinances, when you think about it, is if you have a lot, single family, you can cover 60% of the lot with your impervious surfaces like your house, your driveways, and so forth. 40% is supposed to be landscaping. In a commercial zone, we just say X needs to be landscaping, and we regulate it by the size of the building depending on the district. You can add another tool, FAR, floor area ratio, and now you just say, just like you would with the impervious surface, depending on your lot, depends on what size building you get on a floor area ratio. And often that's done when you're doing multiple stories, because you can get a lot of, it's also a height, floor area ratio regulates also a height matter, because obviously you can have a narrow lot and build really tall. But if you have a floor area ratio, you'll cap out that height also. So you can do a floor area ratio system. Often floor area ratios are translated over to your form-based code as an additional part of your form base. But yeah, that's how Park City chooses to regulate building size occupying the lot, so that they keep their green space as little as it might be in downtown, and they keep their heights in check with the floor area ratio.
So to build a home, I can have a 60% home, 40% landscaping, but I could really build a 20% home and have a ton of an 80% landscaping if I wanted.
Yes.
But on Main Street, I couldn't do that.
Well, it's not necessarily the case, because you have certain amount, first you have a cap of 10,000 square feet, so that's one bulk area
Right.
requirement. The second one, you have setbacks are associated with the bulk area requirement. Setbacks are usually coupled with the amount of landscaping. And then you also have building height restrictions.
But I'm saying
So
I couldn't build a tiny building on a big piece of property the way we're zoned right now.
You couldn't, or you could?
Can I? I guess that's a question.
It just depends on what you want to build, but the bulk area requirements will set the maximum amount you can go. So you can do it through setbacks and heights and landscaping. You can do it through a floor area ratio. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
So while I've got you up here, another question on some of the information we had. It said that drive-throughs were not allowed on Main Street, but is my understanding that drive-throughs are allowed on Main Street?
What you're reading on the drive-throughs is a discussion, if I recall, Cassie can correct me, that the Planning Commission had a specific discussion about drive-throughs and whether they wanted to tackle that matter. Ultimately, I believe it lost its merit in a majority vote to you, because they said, look, we have design standards. If somebody can accomplish, this is what I'm remembering, somebody can accomplish the design standards, we shouldn't care about whether they want to drive through. So that all drive-through failed. We don't have anything in our ordinances that says no drive-throughs. What we have in our ordinances is use types attached with the drive-through, and we regulate the drive-throughs based on use type. So a fast food restaurant always has a drive-through. It's one of the definitionary criteria. And so you either allow it or you don't allow it based on that. Banks are another one that have a drive-through.
So that's
You allow
probably
it.
why they're not allowed on Main Street right now.
What's that?
That's probably why we don't allow banks on Main Street right now, as well as fast food
There's
drive-thrus.
a lot of it's controlled through the use. We do have areas, I know when Walmart developed, there was, under the plan center, under the CUP, there was a provision applied that the outlots could not have a drive-through. So we do have instances where we don't allow drive-throughs, but we don't regulate it specifically by base zone.
So I think we need to be really careful, because as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking, oh, a bank on Main Street is no problem. But now I'm realizing the reason the bank was not already allowed on Main Street was because of the drive-through.
That very well could be.
Probably the fast food at the time when this was all, I mean, I'm concerned about the fact that we paid a lot of money for a study to do our Main Street and see what was working and what wasn't, and they took a lot of things that wasn't working off. Well, now we have forgot, we weren't even around or doing anything about the reasons they were taken off. So now we're thinking, well, why isn't a bank on there? So we just are willy-nilly throwing it back on there without realizing there was a reason they took that
Yeah,
bank off.
but
There
I think
was
there-
a reason
But I
that they
think there's
took it off.
arguments, pro and con to the drive-through situation. I mean, just to kind of maybe wound you a little bit, you amended the no new access on Main Street, which would have restricted anything occurring on the Main Street. Now, somebody can get a new access point on Main Street for certain lot type, specific if UDOT will approve it.
But I'm okay with that.
But
Because
if your drive-through, you have to look at what your value of your drive-through. Is it the value of the drive-through having an access on Main Street? Is it a value that drive-through creates something else? Is it a value, okay, that the drive-through can't be on Main Street, but it can exit out onto a local road? So the issue is not simply drive-throughs or no drive-throughs. The issue for me is, what are you trying to accomplish by drive-through or no drive-through?
I just think we have to look at our traffic situation on Main Street, and I don't think it's, you know, you only have to go to Chick-fil-A a few times to realize that you can allow it. We
Right,
have
but
allowed
your
them,
traffic,
and
your
they're
traffic's
bad use.
generated the same predominantly, because if you have a drive-through that exits out on a local street, your traffic study is going to come back okay.
Right.
If you have a drive-through exit out onto Main Street in a short distance between the two, probably not going to come back okay.
I'm not worried about it exiting. I'm worrying about it backing up.
Backing
Like
up
Dairy Queen.
drive-through.
Yeah, there isn't a problem with Chick-fil-A with exiting. It's the line that winds through. And
Well,
so
yeah,
we don't want, our Main
But
Street is
I think
always
you
so
regulate that
congested.
by what your expected stacking amount is into your design standard. And you set the proper stacking amount expected for your design standard.
Was
And
that
that's
not-
what the planning commission, at least Kai Hensey was arguing is, look, if we have a design standard and they can meet the design standard, then the drive-through is irrelevant to as long as you have a sufficient design standard.
But we already, and it's a little bit different, but we already seen that tonight. We can sit here and say, oh, well, it's only going to be, well, yeah, but you know what? The dump trucks or the garbage truck's still backing out on
Yeah,
Pages.
I'm not trying to say
And
that if you
I'm
want
saying
no
there's a-
drive-throughs at all. or
So
not-
there's a
or
problem.
an
I think we
opportunity.
need to look at the drive-throughs. I think we need to be careful and not put too many of these on right now because of the fact that we thought we were being protected by 10,000 square foot building, and as long as we have the overlay on, we're not being protected by the 10,000 square foot. And so somebody could buy up 2 or 3 lots, and they could put a pretty good-sized building down there if that was what they chose to do.
That's a value judgment. You asked the planning commission, I'm just going to argue from the point of the planning commission. During the work session, you turn the planning commission loose. And under the auspice of that work session, right or wrong,
Right.
you said, we need to hang an open door sign. If you want to reel back from that position, that's fine. That's a value judgment. But I wouldn't take it that somehow the planning commission wasn't looking at all. I wouldn't want it to translate the discussion that the planning commission wasn't looking at these things. They looked at these things based on what they thought they heard from that work session.
I
If
I'm not
don't
sure
you're
that's,
changing
I
that
don't think it's
value,
against
that's
the
okay.
planning
yeah, I'm
commission.
not sure that it's implied that this is an attack on the planning commission.
By
Not at
any
all.
means.
No, I just want to make sure.
Okay, yeah, because what I'm
No.
hearing is it sounds like a defense where there isn't one needed.
And then, once again, I was at those meetings, and I felt like that there was 10 or 12 uses that were allowed on Main Street. So we needed to get more uses out there in order to develop our Main Street. And the paper that I have right here with a breakdown of permitted uses on Main Street is 97 uses on Main Street.
97.
Permitted
getting at?
uses?
Permitted use, now, this is not just the, but it's the categories under them. I mean, you've got clubs or services, you're counting that as one, but that's lodges, meeting halls, recreation centers, social clubs. I mean, so I think we've got way more on there than we or the planning commission thought that we were to allow.
Well, that's a value judgment. I'm not going to.
Right.
I just want to make sure that there's not a message that the planning commission didn't look at the
Oh,
issue.
no, no,
no, no,
no,
no.
no, no, we're not talking about the planning commission in any way, shape, or form.
Because this is, the use list is part of the friction that's occurring.
Right.
For me, on the drive-through issue, it became an issue for me when I wanted to drive something off to the DI, and I saw that there were 4 people parked on Pages Lane waiting to turn into the drive-through to drop off, and that's all the way back. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it sometimes happens. I've seen it more than once, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I hadn't thought about that. What if that happens on Main Street? So it's nothing against the Planning Commission. It's just that my life experience brought it right up in my face. I thought, wait a minute, I hadn't thought about that.
The counter, I don't want to devalue that, but remember that you have to look at what you think Main Street makes uses at Main Street viable. So
Right.
there's the argument of, I don't want this to happen, but there's also the argument that if you spend too much time worrying about what might happen, you're not opening up Main Street to the other uses that might be viable. So just create that value balance that you
Well, and
see
I agree,
fit.
but I also agree that I think this study took away a lot of these, and the more I study and the longer I look at it, I realize why most of them were taken off of Main Street, and I think we paid a lot of money to do it, and now just because we're not getting complaints on those things, we put them all back, and in 10 years, we're gonna have this whole room full of people complaining about the things that we've put back on Main Street, because they didn't work there in the first place.
Right, but remember, the root of the discussion is Main Street is not thriving.
Right.
Whether we agree with that, whether it's unique, is all the value judgments.
I agree with
But the
that.
initial issue is it's not thriving, what do we need to do? And your 85 plan said that. Your 85 plan said Main Street never really developed into anything. Now,
Right.
that might be, and your 85 plan said, let's do something about it. 2003 came along, we revamped it and said, yeah, we still need to do something about it. 2008 came around and said, hey, we're going to try to do something about it. Now we're reacting to that do something, which
And
has,
now we're going
was
back to what we
argued,
changed in the
and now we
first
may
place.
be
We're just
returning.
redoing
But I
it.
think that's what I'm trying to point out to you. You need to balance all of the policies together and decide what you want Main Street to be. Because it will create intensity and congestion, getting away from the word density. If you want Main Street to thrive, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. To what extent? Does it need to be a drive-through? I'm not trying to argue it needs to be a drive-through. Just, where do you want it to be?
But
And
that's
then
my
set
concern.
set the use and intensity at that
Is that
level.
we maybe need to consider what we're gonna do with the overlay. I mean, as hard as it is, the planning commission did exactly what we asked them to do. And they sent this to us, and I understand that. But now, because I am more educated than I was before, I realize the overlay is going to let bigger buildings in, it's going to do, that some of these things we might be able to put back on Main Street,
Yeah,
but we need to fix
but-
the overlay first.
But I don't agree with you 100%, and here's why. The overlay exists right now.
Right,
So whether you do something with use list, that risk is still there.
right.
The
But some of
question is, does a use list create more propensity for it to happen? That I would give you the argument for.
Okay.
Corey, what are the parameters that the overlay allows that language that they go over 10,000 square feet?
It doesn't say you can go over. It says that in the overlay, it says, here's the provisions, but it's not to interrupt any other provisions except modified by this chapter. That chapter modifies where your build is and your build lengths that are onto your streets. And that has the ability to exceed the 10,000. In the case of the fire department, it did.
So only if
So
they're
it wasn't a-
following
so it wasn't
everything
amendment.
else. Yeah.
It was an amendment that was needed for the fire department. because
So
the
what
fire-
you're saying is there's a specific formula
Correct,
that gave that 13,000.
yes.
Was that discussed at the planning commission when that was approved? Because I don't remember that being
No,
discussed in
because
here.
it
No,
met the
'cause it's already
criteria.
in
Because it already existed, they didn't need a text, anybody
They
could
didn't
do
need
that.
to-
It
they
wasn't
didn't
done
need-
for the
They
fire
didn't need to amend the
department.
text.
Anybody could have built that building and had it that
I
size.
wasn't saying, was it separately approved? I was saying, was it called out and did somebody say, hey, this is over 10,000 square feet? Oh, no, that's all right because of X.
No.
That would be usually applied under a new build, not necessarily a new tenant, correct?
But the fire station is
So-
a new
so
build.
the-
The fire station's a new
Yeah,
build.
yeah, you would apply the overlay in a new build. And I think a lot of our focus was getting in new tenant spaces, getting new businesses into existing buildings, as well as new builds in the future.
Correct. Correct.
So we were looking at what's going inside the buildings.
So I hate to
before
admit it,
the
but I have
outside.
not read the study that Robin is talking about. How do I get a hold of it?
Study.
The one that, where they,
So it chains together, if I'm looking at the right code, it should be zoning code 12.34.808, which is special regulations, section C. Can we bring that up on?
That's the CM zone?
Yes, I believe that's the CM zone.
So where was that again?
Municipal code online, 1234.880. If that's the one you're talking about.
Right, the bulk area of 10,000. There's a table that'll say CM 10,000, CH 50,000, and then above that,
Well, this is where you deviate to that, so. So the instruction of the planning commission about hang the shingle out and let's say we're open for business. I own that, I said it. And I don't have a problem with the creativity that's gone into it. The question is what I'm hearing, and we've talked about this before, is the order correct in which we're handling it?
correct.
Now, that isn't the question I was asking. I'm talking about this study. How do I get a hold of this study?
Oh, the 85 study?
Got it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what study. You got the 85 plan, you have the 2003 zoning code, which I think Robin might have referred to, and you have the 2008 Main Street study.
wasn't it the 2002 when we paid like $30,000 and they took a lot of the things that were allowed on Main Street off?
So it wasn't really a study, but it was
wasn't a
a
study.
year and a half long rewrite of our zoning
But we paid somebody
Yes.
$30,000 to recommend those things.
to, yes, to rewrite.
Well,
the
yeah,
zoning.
the $30,000 was the Main Street 2008, so I don't know what.
Oh, is it the 2008?
But I don't
Okay.
know if I don't know the cost of the 2002, 2003 change.
Yeah, I don't know the cost of that, but we did have a consultant help us redraft the zoning code.
So was there a report of some kind, or did it just come out in a rewritten code?
In 2003, the zoning code was just the rewrite, the edits that came out. There wasn't any kind of report or
So is
study.
there a way to find out what was
about in
removed?
2008?
You could probably compare the 2003 code with the prior code at some point in time, yeah. You'd have to customize that. You'd have to go back to what was prior ordinances allowed, research that at the archives, at the recorder's office, and then research what was adopted in 2003, because we've changed since that time, too.
But to Bill's answer, there's not something saying we took banks off because we didn't want drive-throughs on Main Street.
My only place, you'd have to read through all the subcommittee information to see if anybody said that explicitly.
Was actually rewritten over a year's time with a series of meetings with the city council, taking sections at a time.
So you might research any archived minutes of those meetings.
Those online, yeah, Jake, under the new
In
website?
2003?
No, are you talking
Oh,
about
you're
a section of zoning? Which section, George?
No, I was talking about the
minutes you were
old
just
minutes
referring to.
online. Are they online?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure
That far back.
that.
I don't know how far back the minutes online go.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it only goes back to, well, Novus only goes back to 13. I don't know how far the links to the old minutes went back.
I think they've been cleaned up by our recorder.
So the one I was talking about was 12.34.808, special regulations. I believe that applies, to-
34.
yeah, chapter 12, 34.80.
Okay.
There.
I'm just trying to figure out if is this what you're referring to, Robin? Because it says new development, so C reads new development in a commercial zone which is larger than 10,000 square feet shall only occur within a planned center as provided under 1221.110. Is that,
Is that the one we were talking about?
No, if you go to the development standard tables, that's to when you want to exceed. If you go to the development table, you'll see the 10,000 sitting in the development table.
But this is what allows it to be bigger than 10.
No,
But
the-
remember, anything in here would be
34.3.
regulated by the overlay zone.
The overlay
These are-
adds the lot types
This one
and
right here.
the formula-based
That's where we're at.
that allowed the fire department to go larger. In fact, remember part of the struggle is they didn't go large enough.
Right, that was the problem. They would, I mean, they could have gone more than what they did,
They needed
because,
15 more feet to meet the
yeah,
formula.
so you figure how big that building would be if it was another 15 feet by however long it is.
Probably another 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're easily looking at 15,000 square feet buildings or bigger down there, depending on,
If you had a tear down of a large piece of property or assemblage, yeah, you have the potential, but you have the potential right now.
right.
The
but
question
that's-
is the propensity of the uses add to that.
Right, and so that's why I'm saying, I felt comfortable with some of these uses because I thought we were controlling them a little bit by their size, and now I realize we're not. So that's why I want to look at the overlay, figure out what we can do so that, you know, it makes a difference on me being able to vote on any of these or many of these, because I've been under the miscommunications for over 10 years that it could only be 10,000 square feet.
Well, it was that way until 2010 when we adopted the overlay.
So I've been misdone over only 8, 9 years.
Trying to give you credit.
So Robin, let me see if I understand this. So let's take a hypothetical, like general printing. You would be okay with general printing on Main Street if it were restricted to, say, pick a number, 5,000 square foot building, but not a
Right.
10,000 square foot building?
Right, and definitely not a 15,000 square foot building.
Yeah, now you're talking about markability of the uses.
Well, I think I'm hearing a ratio of what creates, there's market viability is one, but this is regulating impact based on size. To me, there's a difference between maybe I'm speaking out of turn, Robin, but I kind of, the way I'm hearing you is same thing as if I had a commercial shipping dock with 12 bays has a lot more impact than one that has 2 bays, because there's only so much traffic I can run in and out of that. I mean, maybe that's an
Correct.
oversimplification.
Correct,
but-
and we're building these next to homes, and we're building them next to businesses that are already there, that are in soft commercial and didn't expect us to put something with the intensity that we're looking at, especially when we increase the size. With the size of, we increase the size, we increase the intensity.
Yeah, but you have to decide where that marker would be, because a fire department at 10,000 square feet is not going to be any different than a fire department at 13.
That's correct, but some of these that we were
Except you
looking at-
might have eliminated 1 bay for the ladder truck.
Right, but I'm just saying with these things right here, I'm just a little hesitant until we get further along in the process and see what type of uses we're going to allow because of
Yeah,
the intensity.
I just think you're going to have to go deeper than what you're thinking when we talk about the scheduling, if you want to start studying impacts and marketability based on size. I think if you're comfortable at 10, we could leave it at that. If you want to change those, I think you're at a outside research level that you need to pay for.
Are there any of these uses, Robin, that are a no-brainer? Like if you took this entire list and said there's 1 or 2 that are acceptable regardless of risk, or is there anything that qualifies?
I'd like to add single-family home, and that's not on here. I'd be great with a single-family home.
They're already allowed right now under the overlay, so.
Oh, in the overlay, but not.
Not in a commercial medium though, or the hybrid? How does that work?
The overlay was the mixed sector use concepts versus just a standard commercial zone. I mean, you wouldn't take the CH zone and add single family to it. And the concept is similar to the CM zone, because other places, the CM zone, would you want single family in your commercial, neighborhood commercial centers, generally speaking?
But it's not a commercial center. I think
No,
that's,
no, no, but
that's
remember,
part of
you're
what we're
just
getting
looking
back
at the
to.
commercial medium. Single family was added because the South Main Street overlay said that section for this commercial medium's okay. That's what was convinced. But if you applied in theory the commercial medium somewhere else, would that be the same case? Generally, no, you don't put residential.
But how much commercial medium do we have in the city? I think we've talked about the fact that there's almost none. So when we talk commercial medium, we're basically talking Main Street.
It's the only commercial.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is.
So I
is
don't
that-
need to theoretically
No, it's-
whatever about
the issue
some place
is
that doesn't
that-
exist.
Yeah, well, the point
Right?
is you don't want to take a base standard zone and start fooling with it oddly. That's what you use your overlay to do. That's all I'm saying.
Robin, about the drive-throughs, to go back to that, if drive-throughs are an actual concern for you, I think you saw that maybe in a previous planning commission report. And to really make that really easy, all we did was asterisk 2 of the uses and say drive-throughs aren't allowed. So if drive-throughs are a concern for you, that's a really quick solution to limit those drive-throughs in certain uses. I also still really want to know how you got 97 permitted uses on the main street, since I'm counting 15.
She's talking about an expansion of what every one of those applies to.
On 15, but you look, I mean, you've got Office General, but that's real estate brokers, insurance agents, credit reporting agencies, property management firms,
Okay.
investment firms.
So he's looking at all the
Sure, okay.
subcategories.
So then there's probably like 500 not permitted uses if you want to like divvy them up that small.
Right, but we were saying my understanding, and I don't know how everybody else felt, was we only had 10 or 15 things that anybody could put on Main Street. And now I'm realizing it isn't only 10 or 15 things. And we met with the Planning Commission, so I don't know how much of this they realize. My concern was,
Yeah.
we've only got 10 or 15.
I
we
think
need
that's
to
an
add to it.
overanalyzation. When you're talking about office, it's just giving you examples. They're not uses. General office creates the same impact, whether it's a real estate or whether it's a professional service.
Correct.
So interestingly enough, as part of this discussion, I went out and looked on Loft to see what we have in Centerville in commercial leasable spaces. We have 44,000 square feet of vacant office space if you take the whole city. The question for me is do I perceive somebody is going to build something on Main Street to compete with the existing open commercial leasable space? I'm not sure I believe that, because some of the, and again, you've got everything from $27 per square foot down to I think about 8 or 9. So pick your location. But I'm really wondering if, sure, I could say, all right, secondhand store, great, add the use. Do I see one coming to Main Street because we added that? Probably not. I just don't see that changing. I'm thinking fundamentally we're looking at it wrong in terms of, are we going to create this viable commercial district by making a few tweaks to the uses? I'm not sure that I see that now. I see more of a viable option if we can figure out some sort of density component that's not onerous to the neighborhood, that a residential corridor makes more sense in that area just because of the way things are shifting. And so I guess my hesitation would be is throwing a bunch of additional uses that frankly would be lip service, because I don't think any of them are coming. And I'm not sure I want to do that because there's this us and them thing with the Planning Commission, which I don't see, and I don't want to throw out a use and say, let's just adopt that, because then the Planning Commission will feel good that their efforts have been not in vain. I'm looking at this as, I see the direction possibly being modified as we've become more educated on the subject, and I'm willing to talk to the Planning Commission about that. And like I said, I'm willing to vote for secondhand stores and call it a night and say that, we've dotted that one. But I think that as the corridor goes, it's got to change, and I don't think it's going to necessarily be a revitalization of commercial. I think it's going to be existing uses that are coexisting with potential residential component. That's just me. I don't know how everyone else feels.
No,
I know Bill's like what we did with the other one about getting rid of commercial resident. It was back when we talked about
whether
Mixed
commercial
use?
be absorbed back into residential.
right where you'll get commercial back if you go residential, which is a real fear because
No, I think the Planning Commission would be open to that kind of discussion with the council, because I think from their viewpoint, and a little bit from my viewpoint, there's been such a task after going after the residential. Rightly so, probably, because of densities and so forth. But there's been such a long period to chase after multifamily and reduce it to whatever acceptable levels. And so with that past effort, the commission just took the use list and said, okay, that's been an issue. Can we just turn to the uses? And I think you're right. Whether you add a couple of uses and actually come, I think is irrelevant. at this point in time with Main Street. I think Main Street is what it is. And I agree, the open discussion on whether you want to preserve certain commercial uses and the opportunities for the service sector and add some additional uses. And I think residential is a component, but you got to be careful, because I agree with Bill's previous comments that I don't see a commercial resorting back to a single family home, even though that might be the most desirable use. But I do see absorption of commercial into multifamily, and that is a reality. And the question is,
we just had commercial turn into 31 homes.
yeah,
straddling between. So
if you open the door to multifamily at any level, that will probably come faster than the secondhand store.
Right.
Oh, for sure. But
As long as it doesn't become secondhand residential, I mean, we want to make a good product.
But the value question is, are you in the Planning Commission ready to have the dialogue on whether you really want multifamily on Main Street as fillers and reuse adaptations? Because it will come.
and single family.
Single family, less likely to come.
You told me that about Dick's Market too.
Yeah, but you're talking about a holistic 33 units, not a $700,000 building being torn down in value for another $700,000 single-family home.
But we have a lot of buildings down there that aren't $700,000 buildings.
I know that I lost on the Brighton next to the fire station, but you're not going to see a
And that house
holistic
by
tear
me
down
that
for
they've
single
taken
family.
down piece by piece, brick
Yeah,
by
you-
brick, and put up a massive.
I'll be ready to retire and eat crow if you have a mass reuse of commercial into single-family homes.
But I would like to see, I don't think we're going to all go to single-family homes, but services that would service the single-family homes around Main Street.
And that's what we've been talking about.
And that's what, okay, but I'm talking about services, more services as opposed to
Like what?
Like
What type of services?
personal services, I guess.
Okay, that's allowed.
It is allowed.
Yeah.
Have we,
But if
have we increased the demand and use for Main Street yet?
Not yet, and that goes to that potential overlay problem. So
Right.
this is where the sequencing comes in again.
Well, you have somebody that has shown you, right or wrong, a building conversion strictly for commercial, under the overlay.
Mm-hmm.
They're just waiting.
We're
Might be the
waiting,
wrong use.
they're
but
waiting for a use that I don't think they're going to get.
Yeah, but
because
what I'm
it's
saying is there
incompatible.
is some adaptation that can still happen.
Sure, not arguing that at all. I think what I'm looking for, and I'm not sure how to get this, is okay, how does everyone get to be a winner in this situation? And we move on to the next piece, which is the actual revitalization through the addition of a residential component that's appealing to the neighborhood and is viable. Because right now, if you point to something and say, I think residential will go there, a developer will be groundbreaking before you turn around.
Right.
The question is can you do something that's viable, not onerous in terms of density or height, or just completely out of character? Since fortunately, sorry, Main Street, there isn't a lot of character to call as your anchor, anything that's a decent product would be okay, as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I wouldn't be making that call. That's what we have.
I think the residential will be hitched a little bit on what you're thinking about intensity and design. Because,
Sure.
you know, I could see the design getting just as burdensome as the form-based code in certain circumstances. But if it's not, and it's at a sufficient level to be absorbed into reformatting, yeah, you know, that reformatting can vary from keeping the commercial use mixed with accessory residential, or it can be varied with tear down and new residential put in.
Well, St. George likes to refer to that as the live-work unit. There is no mixed component down there. It's all live-work units.
Well, I know of a couple of illegal apartments on Main Street, so.
I try to stay out of the policy debate. I realize it's not my job.
Is this like one of Bill's?
But I just want to raise this point because I have wanted to talk to the council over time about this. I think if you want to support your single-family character style here in Centerville, you need to work on your tax base. And I think Main Street and the west side can help you retain what you want in the single family that you have now, because that's costly. It doesn't pay for itself. So I don't know what Main Street is I have the tax numbers for what Main Street is generating for property tax, which I can tell you it's going to be more for those commercial buildings. There's some multi-million-dollar buildings on Main Street. So you've got your property tax and your sales tax. So anyway, I just think that a way to support the goals that you want for Centerville is to try and be more proactive in your economic development, which hopefully isn't as bad of a word as some of the other things we've talked about, but I think it's a realistic way to preserve what you have.
I agree with that.
And Main Street's part of, I just want you to consider Main Street before you convert it to residential, because I agree as soon as you convert it to residential, that's the way it will go, given the market right now. And then you're also deteriorating the existing commercial once you put that incompatible use.
Okay, and that's what I was going to say. I want to protect the uses that we already have that are giving us our taxes. And I think some of these take away from them. So that's my concern is, especially depending on how large they're built. So am I okay with a bank without a drive-through? Yes. Am I okay? I mean, there's several things on here. A mortuary, as long as it's not more than 10,000 square feet. So there's a lot of things that
it can't have its drive-through though.
only to get away. So I'm okay with a lot of these, and I was okay with them until I realized they could be more than the 10,000 square feet. And so then I think we're hurting our small businesses on Main Street. So I agree with you. I think we need to try and get more commercial down on Main Street, but I think it needs to be a service-oriented, something. And so I will agree with that. But I think we need to fix the overlay so we don't open up any loopholes that somebody comes running in and buys up 3 pieces of property and puts some big, huge building down there. Then we've lost what we were trying to get. So all I'm saying, and I feel bad because I don't want to.
I think you're right, there's some impacts to it, but be careful. If you do a adaptive reuse in a nice commercial building, you actually increase your tax base.
And that's true.
It will have some consequences.
Right.
But overall, you increase your tax base and keep your single family still solid. So, the service base, I agree with, but you do need to cap where you think your risk factors are. But I think Lisa's right in the issue that if you just say service only, like professional care service, you're not going to really increase your tax base.
But
you're
I'm
not going to really make that tax base solid.
But we're not saying that. You look at how many things we already have. Now, like you said, they're not there. So are they going to work? I don't know. But I think if we took the overlay away, then some of these things could build a whole lot easier and a whole lot cheaper.
But I think the overlay actually preserves it better than taking the overlay away and just leaving it commercial bulk area.
So we need to tweak the overlay.
Well, there's
or
risks.
Change the overlay.
Change the overlay.
There's risks both ways, and as far as the preservation of tax base, it may come with a realignment. I mean, we're looking at, I'm going to use an example that's not 100%, but take the avenues in downtown Salt Lake City. Those are mutually exclusive districts. I mean, there's a grocery store up in the avenues, but for them, by and large, it's residential on one side of town and it's commercial on the other side. We do have developable land that's on the west side of town, and we have developers who are interested or have at least applied for higher density. And I think that when they talk about the density debate and the preservation of the tax base, it has to come with some trade-offs. If you're going to, let's say, just for purposes of discussion, Main Street went all residential, just boom, overnight it's all residential. Okay, well, where's that tax base going? It has to come out of the west side, and that's going to come from density or something else. Correct. So it's as a community, do you want to have a hybrid of some compatible commercial uses with some residential component on Main Street and let it market figure out where it's going, but at the same time incentivizing growth on the west side for preservation of your tax base? The other alternative is you tell people it costs a lot more to live here, which nobody wants to hear.
Okay. Agree.
That was like a hallelujah or something over there.
I was getting ready there, but I thought that might go too far.
So the question really is, Mayor, is where do we go from here with what we have in front of us tonight?
Right.
I don't feel adding uses at this point makes any sense.
So that's what you have to decide. What I've heard through this, and by the way, I need to ask a question. There are some drive-throughs allowed presently, right? On Main Street?
I'm trying to think what's.
Isn't
Cutler's.
isn't Cutler's a drive-through? Is that not because it?
Cutler's is a drive-through.
And Twisted
Because
Sugar
it
is a
comes-
drive-through.
Isn't it there, though, because it was grandfathered?
Yes.
Yeah, the
Okay.
definition of fast food, I think, includes the drive-through, so it's an oddity that comes with that type of use where we allow a drive-through. So, but if fast food is no longer allowed, then it's just non-conforming, which probably most of them are.
So is Cutler's considered fast food?
Yes, it's non-conforming.
So, one of the best things I heard said, most intelligent things, was Councilman McEwen saying, if we change the uses, probably there's gonna be no change made. I think we get afraid of changing the uses because we have this fear that all of a sudden, it's gonna turn into backup, congestion. I just don't see that with these uses. But at the same time, I'm also hearing from all of you that probably, and I don't want to influence your vote here, that you've stuck with this for a long time, that you want to do the overlay before you do the uses.
Yes.
So that's, I think we're at that point. You got to decide on these uses, based on all that's been said, whether you're going to table it again until you get the overlay fixed out, or you're just going to make a motion and.
We've got one project that has been negotiated a lot and being held hostage to this.
Yes, you do.
That I think should be resolved.
And and I have big concern about that one
And
too.
so just discounting it whole hog, I don't feel is appropriate. We
Then I'm
either
not-
we either need to tell them, no, we're not gonna do it, or get it done.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was the last one, so I'm glad you brought it up.
There are several of these uses that I think make sense. There are some of them that I don't think make sense. I mean, there have been some other discussions going on this week, for example, the veterinary service. There are mixed opinions about whether or not it includes or does not include dogs kept overnight and the noise that does, but I think the last decision is it does, which probably in a residential neighborhood doesn't make sense. Shopping center is one of those that, why bother? I mean, there's no place where there's enough room and that's gonna happen, so why even put it on, at least in my mind. Secondhand store, there was a time in my life when I loved them. At this point, the ones that I see kind of leave me saying, ew, is that ugly or what? So I just should not put it on Main Street. Hope I don't offend anybody when I say that. I personally don't object to restaurants. There are others who much do. Research service, I don't know what a research service is.
So I had a question on that today, and in all actuality, it could be, I mean, here again, I think research service could be all right, but we need to define it a little better so we don't have medical research or something going on like North Salt Lake had, where they were disposing of it and stuff right in the neighborhood that caused, you know, a real problem. And right now, it would be allowed as under research.
Well,
So
again,
those
that
things-
gets into the conversation we had earlier about approving something that then someone breaks the rules and causes a problem. And so I think what Corey kind of told us was, don't go there.
But then you
People
can.
need to follow the rules.
But what Robin said, though, is that the rules allow it right now. It wouldn't be breaking the rules.
Not disposing of things improperly, they don't.
It wasn't, they didn't do it improperly in North Salt Lake. They just
What?
did it.
What were they doing? What were they disposing of? I thought there were syringes and other things included.
No, there was something they were burning. It was body
They
parts.
disposed medical waste, but they were violating some air quality standards in the research.
But so, I just think, we don't need to put conditions on them. We need to list, you know, what kind of research can be there.
Well, my comment was, I don't know what research is, so.
Right, and so
Fair.
that's what I'm saying, is I think most of these, we just need a little more clarification on them, and then I think a lot of them could be approved, but I think they need to be looked at, cut down. Like I said, I really respect the planning commission for what they did, and so I feel bad. I think it was our fault my fault for not being educated enough to realize how much of it was tied to the overlay, so.
Well, you can't take that on all yourself.
And I didn't realize how
didn't
big the
as a
buildings
group.
were because it was repeated in the meeting several times. Well, it's, you know, it's taking care of itself. It can't be more than a 10,000 square foot building. So knowing that takes away, you know, restaurants. Could we look at maybe putting restaurants on the west side and not on the east side, and maybe, you know, what type of restaurants? So no, I don't think fast food belongs on our main street or ever will. I think we've got that on Parrish Lane.
But Cutler's is a nice,
I do agree. I like Cutler's, but could that be classified as anything other than fast foods? Because
It meets the same components as McDonald's.
You're not going to have a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A or anything come to Main Street. They are big corporations. They study this. They're not going to go into an area where 20, 25 cars are backed out on Main Street because people aren't going to come and use their services. You know, so you're going to get a mom and pop shop like a Cutler, like Councilman Entz says, it brings some feel to the town.
But we could,
you know?
we could do an eatery. I mean, there are things that we could do that wouldn't open it up for McDonald's, because I disagree. I think you could get a fast food place on Main Street.
Not one to that size, you're not.
You do have taco time.
You do.
pardon, say that again,
Just
sorry?
saying. You do have taco time.
That's true.
Yeah, so a few of these are already existing, like the veterinary clinic that you mentioned. There's one that already exists, fast food.
There's a veterinary clinic on Main Street?
Not on Main
Not
Street.
on Main Street.
It's in the corridor.
It's in the corridor,
It's
but
in
it's
the
not on
corridor,
Main
but
It's
it's
Street.
in the
down
CM
below.
zone.
But it's down below. It's not
By
on
the
Main
Keller
Street, and it's
Williams.
Talking about the Centerville Veterinary
The one
Clinic?
by the U.
in where the old
House.
post
I don't know, I
office
didn't know it
used
was
to
there.
be.
Where is
Yeah,
it?
there's one off of Main Street. Trying to think of
It's
That's
right
part of your CM
behind
zone.
Maverick.
Yeah. so
Right.
It's part of your
Yeah.
CM zone.
behind that.
But
Okay, so
it's
it's not
not,
on
there's
Main
no residential backing right up to it. It's all in. It's got commercial and around it. It has multifamily across the road. But it's not the same.
But that's the same zone, so I just want you to be aware that
See, and that's
It's
why you're
already
going, that,
there.
now that starts to meet your argument of going to the overlay where you can start splitting the west side from the east side, leave a base zone intact, and reformat the overlay that adds uses east and west.
And you think that would be a good idea?
Mhm.
That's
If
kind
you
of what I
want to
think.
create,
See, and
if you want to create that distinction.
There's so much more that could be done with this. It's just taken us a long time to come up to speed. And the Planning Commission has helped us by going over this and talking about it. I think they've helped educate us.
Thanks for letting me try to defend the commission a little bit.
So,
I would like to get out on thin ice. Lisa, can I get some guidance? If I want to change the proposed ordinance, but then put up a vote on it,
So you could just make a motion to approve the ordinance.
so it's a single one, or does it come in two?
Well, you can do either. You can make a motion to approve the ordinance and see if you get a second, or you can, and then you can amend the the motion to add some conditions, or you could make a motion adding all of your conditions and see if you get a second. Either way.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion that we first revise the proposed ordinance by changing the list on the table of uses and removing recreation and outdoor entertainment from a conditional use.
Okay, wait, let me keep up with you. Removing recreation, entertainment, outdoor
Yes.
as not permitted?
Yeah, so it's now, this proposal has it going from not permitted to conditional. I want to go back to the not permitted.
Okay. And what about recreation, entertainment, indoor?
I'd leave it where it is. Until we get better definition of what a research service is, I'd take it back to non-permitted. Restaurant, fast food, non-permitted. Restaurant general, I would be inclined to leave it, but I'm open to discussion. However, they have to be able to control their odors. Secondhand store, from permitted back to not permitted. Shopping center, that's a waste of time, just leave it where it was at not permitted. Veterinary service, I guess I'd leave that one. So I would revise the ordinance that way.
What about the ones above it?
Pardon?
What about the ones above that?
I'm sorry.
So just, are you leaving all the other,
All the others I was leaving.
okay, and, okay.
So all the others I was leaving. Bank financials, business equipment, construction, sales and service, mortuary, printing general, recreation, entertainment, indoor. I was willing to leave all of those in their current format.
So if you could get a second, you could at least debate the motion.
Yes.
And then further amendments to take things off or put them back on.
Yes. So that would be my motion. Then the question is, can I get a second? Doesn't sound like it.
I appreciate. Did everybody hear what Councilman Ince has on and off? I appreciate you trying to get a solution to this, Councilman Ince. Do we have a second to that motion? No, do we have a second? No second. So do we have any other motions on what we're doing with this? Since I don't know that there's really more debate from it. I think we have to make a decision. Unless somebody else has any more compelling arguments.
Well, I don't think we should continue to table it, that's for sure. Bill, in honesty, the reason I didn't give you a second on that is because I can't support the ones that are on top. As far as
Which ones?
bank, business, construction, mortuary, I don't know that any of those necessarily make sense, given.
So construction, sales and service limited that we've been discussing for a long time, you can't support.
No, I can't. I mean, the more I've looked at it and I've done the math, to keep a business viable, that's a lot of traffic. And I'm not sure it's compatible with the area. That's been my concern for a long time, even before that building was purchased, is that, you know, it's just, if you take the cost of the building, couple of employees, cost of goods, I mean, that's a lot of material you have to move through that facility to make it viable. That's my concern, is my true honest belief is we'd end up in a situation very similar to the car
What we
lot.
talked about, Carlo.
Yeah, where to maintain the viability, I'm gonna pick widget X, if you sell it for $35 and you picked it up for 20, you gotta move a lot of widgets to cover your tax and everything else. So I don't know, that's, to me, that one's just a raw numbers game, that's why I didn't throw a second out there. One night when Tammy should be here to second, she's not, 'cause you would've gotten one on that. But the alternative, and this is the alternative motion would just be motion deny ordinance 2018-25 in its entirety, which is as draconian heading the other direction. I don't know if I'm gonna get a second on that one.
Do we have a second motion on the table? Do we have a second on it?
That's painful too.
Gonna get it either way.
Yeah,
So if we're not
I
get-
can second that one.
We do have a second on it. Further discussion before we vote on it?
I really think it's my chicks coming home without a chicken coop already built to change the uses before we look at the overlay.
I absolutely see the merit of that, and I wouldn't argue strenuously with George's motion.
And it's not that some of them can't be made to work. It's just that
agree. I think
we
some
don't
of it-
have the right protections in place. I think the overlay is the thing that allows them to work. But now that we understand the overlay better, which we didn't before, it also leaves us open because we haven't adapted it.
So I think we can look at these again. I mean, I don't want to table it, I want to do, to move on, but then I think a lot of these will probably be on our thing to look at again once we have worked out our overlay problems and maybe, looked at putting restaurants on the west side of the road instead of the east side of the road, and, some of those things that would be more appropriate.
Well, we have to be consistent, because in terms of if we deny this because the overlay is the issue, and we fix the overlay, would these have been viable either way?
But they're not viable with the
No.
overlay
Okay,
because of the
just-
size of the buildings.
Sure, okay, just
Well,
making sure.
In that case, the logical thing, and I don't know if this is debating George's resolution, is to table it until the overlay's done.
But what do? We want to table it, or do we want to just,
You got to
My
back,
2 cents. If you
Again,
want it to hitch it to the.
I've been
to the
adding, you're at
overlay-
6 or 8 cents by now.
Okay, 8 cents. I'm upping it, 10 cents. If you want to hitch it to the overlay, do the draconian, get rid of the uses now, and then as part of that, we'll bring the use discussions back up after you are at hit your overlay. But understand the uses are going to come after the overlay.
Right.
Tabling it indefinitely
isn't helpful.
I
isn't
agree.
helpful.
I agree.
I think that this is, the framework is going to show up again, for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I want to make sure it gets communicated back to the planning commission. This is not a dead effort. It's just being resequenced,
Yeah,
and this will get
you'll just say,
reused.
bring that framework back, and then I hear that you'll look at that framework and start modifying definitions or whatever it needs to make you comfortable with a select number that's in that framework. So I don't see it as a rejection for the future. I see it as a rejection for now until you accomplish that task.
You ready to vote on it, or is there further? We'll start with Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
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 So the motion passes 4-0. Now, was there another ordinance we need to vote on, or was that it on that one?
That's it.
That's all.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of, I guess, item 7, does that lead to the overlay discussion?
Yeah, yep, that's the next one.
So item 7 on the agenda, process and calendar for replacing the South Main Street General Plan and overlay zone regulations. So this will help us get it on the calendar. In the
Okay.
process of it.
Now quarter. I don't know how confusing this is because it was color-coded to help me, stealing one of Lisa's tactics of trying to keep me straight on something. You wanted, in a general sense, you wanted to accomplish something by the June timeframe. I heard you, but I didn't build it into just June, and I'll explain my reasoning why and see if you want to back it up back into June again. On the calendar, I tried to divide it up into tasks. The first task is the discussion, sitting down with the Planning Commission And it's not coming to a resolution on how it's all going to be constructed in framework. It's coming with the aims that you're trying to accomplish. Are we changing the overlay? Are we amending it and modifying it? Are we going a new direction? Hit something like that in a work session and what we're doing. Same with the general plan. We have a South Main Street general plan. We also have Main Street sitting inside a neighborhood plan. And so we need to have some of those discussions with each other to figure out where the aim is going to land and have that joint work session. What the Planning Commission would like to do as part of that joint work session is they did have a work session on some goals and they're coming back to refine them. So they would like to have a work session scheduled with you in two parts. One, to discuss the upcoming goals in the future for their work for the next year. And then the second half is the element of the South Main Street corridor and discovering of those aims. In the calendar, I put it on the Planning Commission nights. And you'll find that most of the time I did that because as you get back into the season of budget, you're going to be having a lot of other work sessions, and I just tasked it for the Planning Commission nights before their meeting. They're already coming here. You decide if you want to accordingly. But that would happen in March, either the Planning Commission, one of the two Planning Commissions in March to take place with the Planning Commission and have that discussion. The other segment and task is looking at is the timing of drafts. If the aim is to amend the general plan, which I perceive will be a significant discussion about the general plan, then the aim is to begin drafting and even pre-drafting the general plan potential ideas. And then after your aims session, we'd go back in and redraft that at a staff level. So that drafting would take place simultaneously as we move through the month of March. Month of March, we need to send out a general plan notice. That's a requirement of state law, notice of intent, and listing your anticipated meeting dates. That's why this schedule would be pretty good to identify those.
And is this just on the overlay zone, or is this on other sections as well?
This would be the general plan and the overlay targeted.
General plan first and then the overlay.
General plan first, which is the South Main Street corridor, and then the overlay targeted. So those are the two parts. First part, general plan draft. In the month of April, I've scheduled in here, trying to bring mine up. We're drafting the zoning regulations. So I'm pre-drafting the general plan and then modifying it based on work session aims. In April, I'm drafting the skeleton for the zoning overlay is happening. The 10th and 24th, the Planning Commission meetings would be scheduled twice. We would present drafts. And this is where I'm trying to tap in, and this is what extends the time frame a little bit more. I'm trying to build in this Planning Commission participating under what their expectation and roles under state law. They're to recommend drafts to you. So once they have the aims, they're going to roll up their sleeves and spend some time with staff talking about those skeleton drafts and what should be added and what are we missing and so forth, and bring a draft into some reality format now that the public can begin to embrace an understanding about. They would do that in April for their 10th and 24th meetings to participate with staff on the drafting of that or of those ideas. The 24th I scheduled in is a potential, the way I look at it is an invitee work session of the City Council. They would tell you what they've come up with to date on that general plan on the 24th. We would hold it at 6 o'clock. If all the council can be there, great. If only 2 of you can be there, great. If none of you could be there, even greater. I mean, just kidding. But that's a meeting night for them to sit down and show you where they're at so that you can bounce a few responses back to them of what they're considering and what your thoughts are that can be included in those drafts. The month of May repeats itself over, but it's going to repeat it with the zoning ordinance now. The zoning ordinance, 2 meetings scheduled in, and on the 22nd is the 6 o'clock meeting, invited, bounce off with you where they're at with the process. Then that's where we would have to start posting notices for actual hearings and formalities. So how do we engage? Well, the first engagement, instead of sitting down, we'll back up a little bit. Instead of sitting down with the public and having a bunch of open houses and trying to figure out what I lesson learned, don't ask a broad question of what to do with Pages Lane commercial and end up with cemetery and park in the listing. So I'm trying to avoid that, but to engage it is the opportunity where first we're letting people know that we have to post a general plan notice. We ought to send it to property owners and business owners. We ought to post it on the website. We need to communicate it out to the general public as we see fit so that they are aware of this is underway. But I've taken into account that sitting down with property owners and business owners and repeating what we've done with the use list is probably worn them out at this point. So they need to be aware that it's happening and aware of the meeting dates and aware of when they will be invited to come. That invitation to come and look at the drafts then would happen at the end of May. Those last couple of weeks we've got to publish out in advance. Just so you know, these are extra notices, which I think are important, but when you do a map amendment, you have to notify the property owners affected by the map amendment. When you do a general plan and a zoning text amendment, you just have to do a general notice. So adding in property owners and business owners is taking an extra step. Why they're important? They're directly affected by the changes. The second half is we need to get the general notice out to the general public and let them know what's going on and to keep a watch and come in and to participate. I anticipate that we need to do some other type of communication effort because you don't want an individual notice sent to everybody by my posting machine. So maybe a newsletter, maybe a utility bill, something of like that's already at an expense of the city to do that with the general public. So we'll set that noticing at the end of May. June is the time that you'll have the formal hearings at the Planning Commission level. One will be on the general plan, and another will be on the zoning ordinance. I've chosen to treat the Planning Commission like you like to be treated, so that they feel like they're kind of boosted up a little bit. You don't want to have a hearing and a decision the same night. You want to have the hearing, feedback, give some comment period time. So we'll use the month of June for their formal hearings and the feedback for them. And then we would kick the July 10th meeting is the night that they potentially make a recommendation to you after they've taken some time to absorb it, give them feedback to staff. We can make changes, whatever comes into play, so that on the 10th, they have a document to work off to begin their recommendation. Whether it achieves that night or a second meeting, I can't guarantee, but hopefully there's been enough work that they can get something to you maybe by the 16th, and the latest is August 6th and 20th for your formal hearings. As you notice, I left those blank because it's, as we come wrapping up that time, then I want to engage with the council on what do you want to do for your hearings and your notices and your time periods. I didn't try to advance guess that with this project. I was trying to just guess where we can get something to the council from the commission. So that's a tall order. Hopefully explains it, the color coding. But it puts, July, middle of July, August before you would receive something. And I just figured June is not a good time for you to have that middle of May to the middle of June. You're going to be filled with some other items, is what I was guessing.
Safe guess.
Safe guess, but it does what we didn't want to do.
Yeah.
That's true.
I know. I was waiting for the phone calls at first, saying, what? August? What are you talking about, Corey? But that's a pretty tall order to engage this way, get the Planning Commission through in a fast way, drafts by staff, noticing out to the public, hearings to listen to them before they get a recommendation.
Well, if nothing else, it will definitely be a year of engagement on this.
Yeah.
So appreciate the work you've got on the calendar you put together. Any ideas on, or questions how you can tweak it, or do you like it, council, or?
I'm always gonna look for compression anywhere I can get it.
Yeah, where do you want to compress it? Do you want to compress the planning commission? I think that's a harder compression time with the planning commission. As you can see, staff's pretty compressed with drafting and getting it to the public.
I agree. I hate to have it take that long, but yet looking at that, I don't see where you're going to compress it. And hopefully, at the end of this, we're going to be done. I mean, this has been a 4-year, 8-year project. So hopefully this is giving us a goal and a timeline. And the planning commission knows where we're working from. We know where they're working from. I don't know.
Yeah, the only compression is simply staff moving the planning commission to the formal process, a lot faster than taking some meetings and crafting it with them and dialoguing back and forth.
And then we end up with, oh, well, we don't think we have enough information. We don't want to vote on it like we did tonight. So I think to do it right and take the time to do it right and have all the information worked out so we can vote on it and make a difference.
Yeah. But I wanted to answer compression. I can compress it, it just comes at a consequence.
It's your elected officials, it doesn't matter, right? Their time is at the city's disposal, but I don't want to burn up a planning commissioner unnecessarily if compression results in too much of a burden.
Well, we're down 2.
What's that?
We're down 2 commissioners, just the pitch for.
Who did we lose?
We lost Kathy Helgeson earlier, and you'll see at the end of this month, Gina Hurst is resigning.
I have a proposal for one tonight.
But I don't say that's a result of this timetable.
No, I was going to say I was going to ask. This is new. Have they already seen this and said I'm done, or what?
No.
Are you getting any? Have this been shared at all with the planning?
No,
commission?
I told the planning commission it would be in the packets by last Friday, but said it was in such draft form. I didn't really want to say this is the schedule yet until I ran it by the council. But I told them I would be sending it to them the next meeting if this passes. Passing meaning you're okay with going this direction.
Yes, a nod.
And I'm still sneaking the foothills in March. Steve committed me to that.
Good, good.
This is his last planning goal that he wants done by.
Yeah, you did notice that they're redoing that first south. We're looking forward to seeing what happens on the foothills with no access there.
That's going to be our access test to see where they really come in.
Yeah.
First south is out of the picture. I guess from a schedule perspective, I'm okay with it. I mean, the goal that I had, which I'll restate, is that I wanted to avoid making it a political football or any kind of election type stuff.
Yeah, I knew that.
Realistically, that's not going to be possible for the most part, but you know, the fallout is it could be a really engaging year in Centerville politics because it will be a pretty big item. But hey, I guess that's what the process is for as well. So buckle up. It's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah, land use has a propensity sometimes to be platforms.
No, not in this town.
Is any other questions? That's the calendar laid out. I guess they've said, Corey, if there is any compression, but I think do it. But that they're now saying that they're not sure that there is. So
Yeah, I think there's still some fluidness with the drafts that we can play with, depending on where the planning commission is comfortable with skeleton drafts and how much feedback they want.
Honestly, where you sold me on the schedule is where you're trying to have them emulate what we've been doing or trying to do to make the public feel engaged rather than, oh, we heard you, thanks for voting. And I think that's good all the way around. It does slow things down a little bit, but I think that has more than not rung true with the public that they're being listened to and that we've got more time to consider it. So on that point, I'm totally behind it.
Finally, I won something like I did something right as a planner. That's not very often.
So go with it. I don't think this is something I get a motion on or
No.
anything. It's just the calendar
I
you're
don't
giving
think
us,
so.
so.
Thank you.
If you could just put all of those into my calendar without me having to touch it. That would be so awesome.
Jake?
I didn't like that, Jake.
That's what I say. Jake, what's wrong with my computer?
That's a good question. I had recently asked Mackenzie to go ahead and send all of you an Outlook calendar for city council meetings, because we were scheduling a lot of work sessions and council meetings, so I said, just always send them the Outlook invite. But then I remembered, I think we had that discussion, so where are you on that? Do you like to add your own, or would you like us to send you the invitation?
As a calendar invite, but not through Outlook, because Outlook
Yeah,
only,
Outlook is-
it only puts it on your city calendar. It doesn't actually populate it to your devices,
Isn't
unless you're
that-
using Outlook as a client.
And
So
I'm
like,
not.
there's
Oh,
like,
good point.
like,
Like, how else could you do it?
send it as an invite
But
with
don't
like.
you just combine your calendars on your phone?
No, because our bring your own device policy requires me to give over my encryption keys, which I can't do because I've got other stuff on it.
Yeah.
So there, you can do like an ICS invite. You actually send it as an attachment, and then you can open it up. Jake knows how to do that.
I can show Mackenzie.
So then you open it up and it puts it on.
You open the attachment, and the attachment gives you the link to bring it into your other calendars.
Yeah, you pick
How many
which
want
calendar.
an Outlook invite?
Well,
Just
it'll-
me?
It'll work with
I'd love an
Outlook.
invite,
It'll
just
work
not
with
Outlook, just
too.
an
Yeah.
attachment invite.
It'll work with Outlook too.
What?
It works with Outlook too.
Okay. But yes, on,
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm getting too many work sessions in here, and they're duplicating in my 3 different calendars.
well, and that's what, after I told her to do it, I thought, wait a minute, we better review that with the
But
council,
if
because I
we-
know we've had it before,
But
and,
if we do that, you guys need to accept, so it might show up.
what?
That's the second part. You have to actually open it and
Oh.
accept
But
it.
what happens, do you accept it on an item-by-item basis, or do you accept the whole package?
So your,
Item-
your calendar invites are on an item-by-item basis, so
Yes,
for the next one,
date
you
and
get,
time.
like, for the next 2, you
Well, I
get
know
2
that's the way
different
it works
invites.
in
but-
Outlook, but is that the way it works in this thing that you're asking?
Mhm, yeah, so you get, if you had 2 appointments, you get 2 different attachments, so you have to click and open each one.
That works for me.
I don't
So
know
why
the
don't we
other way to
try
do
it, and if
I mean, there
you,
might be a bulk ad, but I've never looked into it.
if you don't like all the invitations, then just contact Mackenzie directly and say, hey, take me back off. But I think it's
think it would be good.
easiest if
It's
one
helpful.
person just sends it, in my opinion, and then you all have it on your calendar, and especially all the work sessions.
I think that's good.
All righty. Great, thanks. Mayor's report, because we have some really important matters that we have to get to tonight. I'll just report quickly on a couple of things. With the fire service area report, I think the main thing I want to report out of that is the chief was out of town, so Dave Powers, I talked with him about our fire station going in, and I came back the next day and met with Steve, and I was concerned about coordinating with UDOT any cutting in the road that the fire service has to do, if it's possible to try and get that done before UDOT does all their work. Nothing that drive residents more that you tore up the road, and then all of a sudden, you redid the road, and then all of a sudden you tore it up 2 weeks later. So Steve sent out an email for me to all the parties involved to see if we can coordinate that. I think we're still waiting to see what their calendar is. Steve, I haven't seen anything back. Have you?
Well, I
On
just
that.
put them in touch with each other. It's up to,
Yeah.
it's up
So-
to the fire agency and UDOT to communicate with each other. They're both aware now.
So we got UDOT and the engineering firm and South Davis Metro Fire, at least to try and coordinate that, to see if we can
Yeah.
save redoing a road and then all of a sudden rip it up. The second thing was, it wasn't on the calendar, but we do have a 4th of July chair, and we had a meeting here today for a couple hours and with some of the staff for about half hour of it. as far as getting that rolling, and so we have that in place, and that's moving finally.
Who is it?
Brian and Kim Curnow are the chairs. They have had some, I tried to get somebody that's had some experience in something like this. They did the high school graduation party last year, so they've had to coordinate with a big event like this. So, we have that moving. And like I said, I brought the 4 staff from the city in to help on that as well too today, to tell them what they've done. And they should, I think, I gave them ideas of people I knew that would accept the sub-chairs, and they took those ideas, and we'll see if, because the 2 big committees on that is obviously the breakfast and the parade. So, and then as far as legislative update, they didn't have a League of City Towns this week. Bill went the week before. Lisa and I went a couple weeks ago. I mean, you guys probably saw where they voted down the ban on trucks on Legacy, Todd Weiler's bill. To my knowledge, they're not playing with the 50-50 sales tax formula at this point in time. They are looking to broaden the sales tax base, and I've been following that closely. What they might do there. Bill, what in your report did anything that?
I actually had the opposite. I thought that there was some discussion on the 50-50.
Yeah, I think they've divided it into 2 or 3 aspects, and as explained in the meeting that I went to, the league was saying the first thing they have to decide is what's going to be the, broadening the tax base, what's going to be taxed. And then the next step was deciding, okay, now that we've broadened the tax, who are we going to exclude from that? And then the third thing will be the distribution, which is the 50-50. So at this point,
Correct.
We're not, it will be
Not to
part of
that
the
point.
discussion, but we have no idea where that's going to be until they figure out A and B.
All right.
But and I haven't heard anything on, any proposal in that direction, but.
There are my impression is there are a fair number of people, just based on scuttlebutt in the room, that are trying to talk them into waiting a year and have.
Bill,
take
you
some
might want to
time.
pull your
There are a fair number of people that were in the room who are trying to talk them into waiting a year. I mean, they're halfway through the session now and nothing's been released. And that just doesn't give anybody time to evaluate and react to it
On the 50-50 formula, or broadening the tax base?
on the whole thing.
Yeah. We all can just speculate. I'm with you this far into the process. That's too big an issue that I don't think's going to hit the calendar this year.
That's what the last day of session's for.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Can't happen on the last day of session. Anything else legislative stuff that's the 3 of us, or?
The likelihood of something with regard to affordable housing and additional future penalties is high.
Mainly the House Bill 34, yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
it appears to be a moving target, just with the emails today, they have heard rumor of some amendments, but I think it was supposed to be heard by a committee today, and they said, no, let's have this other committee hear it, so they're gonna hear it tomorrow.
It's supposed to go to Workforce Services,
Yeah.
to their committee. I don't remember what it's called, but.
Yeah, but the speculation is, well, there is nothing written about penalties yet, but the speculation is it's going to slide in late in the session.
And some are still looking, I think what Bill's referring to is potentially going after B and C road funds, which the league is arguing heavily against because it has nothing to do with planning, it has to do with maintaining roads. And so if they want to look at the incentive carrot, it's the transportation funds, which do deal with planning. So that's the argument from the city side, I think.
Right.
But we actually are okay with it, yes? I mean, we have.
I've read through probably a draft 2 times, I'm sure it's been amended, but the way it was drafted, it's more of encouraging a variety of housing types, and it gives you 22 things to shoot for, and there's no real penalty other than maybe we won't be eligible for some of this transportation funding, but I think Centerville can comply with those provisions. And that was the discussion I want to bring back to you when, if and when SB 34 passes, let's talk about how we can, you know, plan for what Centerville wants to preserve, but also doing some economic development on the west side that will help pay for maintaining that. Because I do think you have a number of properties with freeway frontage that if we put the right thing in, you can maintain what you have. And I do think, just looking through that list, that you can comply.
That's kind of what I thought.
We're trying to stay on top of things. First week, Lisa and I went. The second week, Lisa participated
By web.
Webb, and Bill went. I wasn't able to go that week. And then, of course, this week, with it being President's Day, they didn't have it. But
They were talking about trying to do another web one, but I didn't get a notice of it.
I think that you can, they'll offer the web each week if you want, so.
Well, I think they have, but they were gonna do something special because there wasn't a meeting on Monday. and
Oh,
then they-
correct, yes, I didn't listen to that either. That was today.
I'm not going to touch UA and Utopia tonight, other than the UA financial information's in there. The Utopia information that Councilman McEwen gave is in there. Take a chance to review it, refute it, do that too. Review it and have your questions ready for 2 weeks from tonight, right?
Right.
I don't see that I need to hit it when we have Roger Timmerman coming 2 weeks from tonight.
Correct.
I know I requested additional stuff from him that I just noticed was sent to me at 7 o'clock tonight that I'm going to talk to him about, and I'll get that information out to you guys. But so I won't hit that since we'll have him here to ask all your questions too. But you have the information in there to review and prepare for that. So that's my report, unless anybody else has any questions for me. So item 9, we will table that. That would have been the report on the rec district, but Councilwoman Fillmore is not here tonight. So that gets us to item 10, city manager's report.
Looking at the Planning Commission agenda for last week, a couple of things there to report on. One is the preliminary subdivision plat was approved for the Barris Cove subdivision. This is on Chase Lane, East Chase Lane. 14 single-family home lots would be created in that subdivision. So that still would go back to the Planning Commission for final subdivision before it comes to you. So that's the status of that item. Then there was a zoning map amendment, public hearing on Porter Lane. This is the Hofoka property, part of which is zoned medium density and the other part which is zoned low density. And the application was to zone it all as medium density, which is the same as the property next to it. And I think that is coming forward to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission on your March 5th council meeting.
What's the point of that?
What's the point of that? So he can build, my understanding.
Tear the big house down and build some more?
No, the big house is not on one of these properties. The big house is,
These are the little ones up front.
the big house was sold as part of the property that goes with the, became a clubhouse or something for the other
Walton Townhomes.
property.
Still.
This is other property that he owns next to, in front of that big house.
Okay,
By the street.
Yeah.
so they're gonna tear those down and add to it.
What's he intending to do? Keep the house and build some other units?
Yes.
I think on the
Well,
property.
one house has gotta be condemned, it's fallen down.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the intent is to rebuild.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Just see when it comes.
And then, the other item was on your agenda tonight, the cottage on the corner. So that's the report from the Planning Commission.
They also held their goals work session before the regular meeting.
Oh, that's right.
And they would like to meet with you in March, I think, as Corey mentioned.
I think they'll be seeing more of us than they want to see you.
Yeah. Now, that's the one thing you didn't decide, is to when to meet in March with
No.
them.
I think he had offered the two planning commission nights, which are the
The 13th
13th
or
and
the 27th. Now, the 27th is the night of my open house, but I'm perfectly fine with you guys having a joint meeting downstairs. You and the planning commission, I'm serious about this,
No, I
and
think
just
sooner is
overlapping.
better.
Pardon?
I think sooner is better.
Well, if you're willing to come on the 13th, but we had a possibility of another meeting on the 12th that was going to involve the mayor and Bill, and they both expressed concern about that being so close to a tax deadline of March 15 for their business. So seriously, March 27th, I'm fine with.
Well, presumably it wouldn't be until 5:30 or 6 anyway, right?
Well, 5:30, yeah. I mean, my open house goes to 6, but that's fine. You guys go down there and have your meeting with the planning commission downstairs, and I'll just finish up here with a few stragglers that might come in between 5:30 and 6. And then the planning commission will be meeting up here that same night. So after the open house, we'll have to set up for the planning commission meeting. So that's what I'm suggesting you do, is on the 27th. Is that when you're gone though, Lisa?
Yes, I'm gone that week.
You're gonna miss Steve's party?
I know, it's tragic, but my nephew's getting married in England, and I'm officiating. So it's not changeable.
So whether you're on the 13th or the 27th, it doesn't matter to me, but I think it might matter to a couple of your colleagues here. 27th is probably better for Bill and the mayor, I suspect.
Yeah.
Whatever accommodation works for you two, I can make it work.
Go with the 27th, Mayor?
I can't do the 12th and the 13th that week. We got, on the 12th, we're not doing anything, right?
No, we're not doing here on the 12th.
So, but I want to make sure that we all get our fill of roast, and Steve as well too, you know?
Well, you can do that earlier in that period, that open house period. We extended it, we put it to 6, just to allow residents coming home from work that if they want to come in. I won't say we put it to 6. I'm staying out of this if I can help it, the planning.
Well, you do have to attend.
I'll attend, yeah.
Can you bring your wife?
Yeah, my wife will be here.
All right.
So you want me to report to Corey that you go with the 27th?
Yeah.
Mayor, I could make the 13th work. It's probably more for you than me.
Let's do the 13th. I do not want to take away from our chance to roast Steve, you know?
I'm truly not offended if you do the overlap, really. So, but I guess I hear you saying the 13th for the first planning commission meeting. Okay.
I think that's what, I think they're all being considerate of me, but, and they'd prefer the 13th, and I would as well too.
Okay, I'll let
Corey
Corey know then, and that's when they, I think, take the first part and share with you their goals, and the second part is beginning the kickoff discussion about South Main Street. Okay. So the other item under my report is, just to brief you quickly, hopefully, the green waste program. We're going to repeat what we did last year. We will still be able to do it in that parking lot at Island View Park, because the project for Island View doesn't start till around May 1st. But so we'd have the two places, again, Island View Park and Smoot Park, for the drop-off. Have it on 2 Saturdays, April 13th and 20th. That does not interfere with the spring break. Spring break is the first week of April. We had that issue last year.
We've got the shakeout on the 20th.
Yeah, the morning of the 20th, yeah. I think those are compatible, though, don't you think? You just have your radio communication network going on the morning of the 20th.
Well, you got, no, in theory, you
Everybody's-
got all the block captains doing the survey of all the neighborhoods. However, that should be through by about 9:30.
Yeah, I think the drop-off areas are open till like 5, something like that.
I thought it was only noon.
4 or 5 o'clock. I'm pretty sure it's like 4 o'clock. Yeah. We'll advertise in the newsletter in March. Contractor will haul away the debris by the end of April over there at Island View so that the project can start over there, the park project. Anyway, so last year it cost us about $7,300 rather than $30,000 to $40,000. We budgeted this year in the sanitation fund $24,000 for it, but it should only take a part of that to follow the same pattern.
Steve, I think it'd be great when we make the announcements in the newsletter that we talk about the significant savings so people understand how much the city saved by consolidating.
Good idea.
Okay. And the impact on the storm drain system. Yeah. Okay. All right, that's my report, Mayor.
Great. Can we skip to item 12 and come back to 11? If we, the item 12 is the appointments to boards. I sent out to you, all of you yesterday, two proposed appointments. One for Planning Commission and one for Parks and Rec. The Planning Commission individual is Thomas Hunt. He has been serving our Parks and Rec department. Has family ties from Centerville for many years. He's his occupation is a civil engineer, and he had interest in Planning Commission, but we didn't have a spot at the time, so I asked him to serve on Parks and Rec. I've talked with Bruce Cox. He says he's done a wonderful job there, so he's my proposal for Planning Commission. And then for Parks and Rec, Daley Gardner, full of enthusiasm, fabulous background in Parks and Rec, got a Parks and Rec degree from Utah State. She's worked in the Parks and Rec department in Farmington, and so has done a lot with Parks and Recreation stuff. And then I met with her personally today as well too, and I think she'd be a great addition. So those are the two proposed appointments.
What was the second name?
Daley Gardner, D-A-I-L-E-E, G-A-R-D-N-E-R. Any further questions on those appointments? Like I said, I sent you yesterday resumes on them.
I would motion that we consent to the two appointments as defined.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Why I skipped over 11, we do have a closed meeting we really need to do tonight. However, we also had an RDA following, and in lieu of keeping Katie and Jake and others around, I guess I was looking at going to an RDA meeting if we're still trying to do that tonight.
We need at least to cover some of it, enough to get some direction, but we don't need to get all the decisions that ultimately we need to make.
Okay. And then we can go to a closed meeting after that RDA. So do we have a motion on that to do something like that?
Sure. Motion to convene, to adjourn from the city council meeting to convene the RDA meeting with the intent to return to the city council meeting at the conclusion of the RDA.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
We would reconvene regular city council after RDA?
Just enough to have a vote to go into closed meeting.
Yep, that was my intent.
But you have